So, welcome to the next week of lectures. This is week 5 and in this week we will continue our discussion on implementing change, and then we will also see that how we go about linking the vision and mission of an organization with the change management plan of an organization. And finally, we will also discuss that how we are able to manage power and politics in organizations while implementing change, because these are some of the issues that need to be looked into before we go about implementing a successful change plan. So, in the first lecture in this week we will be talking about developing a change plan, that how we develop a change plan. Before that, you remember we talked about the various steps that need to be followed while implementing a change, and we discussed a variety of models and frameworks which talks about different kind of steps like Kotter 8 step model and then Anderson's 10 or 12 stage model. So, based on these steps and the processes that we have discussed, we need to develop a change plan, because unless you have a plan that how we go about managing or implementing a change successfully, it may not be possible. So, there are a lot of issues that need to be discussed in this context. So, we will start about how we are going to manage the implementation phase, because implementation phase is very important. Once you have planned the kind of change that you want to bring, you have decided whether it is going to be incremental or transformational, and then you move on to discuss about the resistance part, so that you are able to manage change successfully. Now, when you are going to bring about any change, you have to have a blueprint or a plan to successfully implement the change, because the moment you talk about the change, or when you say that you want to bring about certain changes in any of these areas that we have discussed, like strategy, structure, culture, people related issues, right. So, it is going to affect your existing system. For example, if you say that you want to bring a change in your performance management system. So, you already have a performance management system. So, in place of that you want to bring about a new performance management system, right. Suppose you want to say that you want to bring about the change in the production system or the technology. So, if you want to bring about this change in the production system, which is going to affect or disrupt the normal work practices, which is already continuing under the existing system. So, first thing that you have to understand, that whenever you are thinking about change, then you have to see that what would happen to the normal work practices under the current system. Are they going to be undermined, are they going to run parallel, or they are going to be closed, right. So, one of the approaches that can be adopted is that the current practices or systems should be continued unless the new system or practice is institutionalized and become a part of the organization, right. So, we should not undermine the existing system, because that has been working well so far and you want to go for a change. So, if you look at it, say for example, in this figure, if you want to move from A, that is the current state, to a more desired state, that is B. So, you want to move from say A to B, that is the desired future state, right. Then you go through a transition state. So, this is a transition state. So, you move through this transition state to reach to a desired end state, right. So, what actually happens, that when you are moving from A to B through this C, so unless B gets institutionalized, you go through this transition stage, and then you have to see that whether you want to continue and keep the old system operating or not. Because if you straight away move from this, then it was going to disrupt the normal systems practices, whatever it is, right. So, you go through a transition state. let the old system continue for some more time before you are able to completely establish the new system. So, the idea here is that whenever you are moving from A to B through C, you also keep in mind that the transition stage is very, very important. And if you are able to manage effectively through this transition and establish a desirable state, that is B, then there should not be a problem, right. So, what we are going to discuss here is that how we are going to manage the transition stage further. So, when you are going to navigate through the transition state, what actually happens, what kind of problems may come up, right. So, sometimes what happens, people give more attention to what is going on, keeping the show on the road. It means, let the present system continue and work and maintain the operations, right. Or they do just opposite of it, they do not keep the show on the road. It means that they stop the operations, they do not go for maintaining it. So, there is less attention on that and they focus is more on the new system and processes. Okay. Now, if you are giving more attention to run the current system or operations, then you are not going to pay more attention to implement the change successfully. So, the idea here is that you need to devise about certain options that what needs to be done during the transition stage, whether you want to continue with the current state of affairs, so that your production, your system, your practices does not get affected by the change, or you are not going to focus on them and you are more worried or focused on implementing the new system, or you are going to find a way out that while the old system is running, you are trying to implement the new system more effectively, so that once the new system is implemented, you are going to discard the old system, right. So, maybe for some time you continue with the old system. The example that I had given, say if you have a performance management system and you want to implement a new performance management system, right. So, while the performance is being reviewed and appraised by the managers currently, you cannot discard them, let it continue for some more time, unless the new performance management system is institutionalized, right. But if you think that okay, running the show is more important than implementing a new change, then it would create more problem, because at this stage you need to ensure that while your current operations are going on, your systems and practices are working, you should also focus on how are going to implement the change, whether it is new technology or new performance management system, whatever it is, more successfully. So, what I am trying to tell you is that how do we go about navigating the transition state, and we are going to discuss it further to see that what actually is done. So, what are the things that we need to keep in mind while you are going to implement the change? So, these are some of the key points that need to be followed by the change managers during the transition phase, so that they are able to successfully implement the change. Now, if you look at some of these points, like you need to appoint a transition manager. Okay. What would be the role of a transition manager? The transition manager is going to see that while the current operations are running successfully, he is also able to see that the new systems and practices are going to be installed and implemented effectively, right. He also needs to look at that what is to be done. So, the role of the transition manager is not just one thing, that he is able to find out what is to be done while going through the current operations and processes, but he also need to see that when you are going to substitute or bring about a change in the current systems and practices, what are the activities that need to be taken care, right. Similarly, he is going to develop an implementation plan. right. So, when you want to move from A to B during the transition phase or stage, there are certain roles and responsibilities that the change managers has to perform, right. They need to identify that how they are going to close down or gradually reduce the dependence on the current system, right, and move on to implement the new system. Say for example, when we try to implement the ERP system at the institute level, which is a more integrated platform for information sharing. Before that, we also had different kind of systems which were not integrated, right. We had different systems for say faculty members, we had different systems for students, staff and other persons. Now, once it was decided that this system need to be replaced with a integrated system, that is enterprise resource planning, which would incorporate all the stakeholders including students, faculty, staff, vendors, suppliers, everyone, right. So, that there is no duplication of the process and it is more cost effective, more accurate and transparent. So, with this idea, when we are trying to implement an ERP system, then you have to see that how we are going to develop this while continuing with the old practices for certain time, right. So, you just cannot discard the old system, because that processes need to be continued related to all activities in the organization, right. And for that you need to use multiple and consistent leverage points. So, gradually you move on. For example, if you have implemented a part of it, then that particular system or work practices gets changed, right. For example, the moment we decided about it and started implementing in a phase wise, the first phase we say that okay, let it be for the faculty members. Next we move on to include the students, then the staff, then the vendors and suppliers. So, in the process what happens, these are the different points, leverage points. Okay. So, one by one you go on successfully implementing the change at different points, so that all the activities gets integrated into a particular system, right. And for each one of them, the next stage is that you are going to schedule the activities. Scheduling means that which system or which activity you need to replace or change need to be decided and when it is to be done. So, scheduling is very important, right. So, you decide okay, which part or which aspect of the change is to be taken care to start with, and what are the different activities that you are going to take up at that particular stage, and then accordingly you decide what about all the activities, schedule them, prioritize them and say that okay, we are moving from say 1 to 2, 2 to 3. So, these are the activities as per the schedule we are proceeding ahead, so that we are able to complete the entire process of change. And then the next stage is resources. You also need to provide resources for these activities. Where I am calling about resources, the idea here is that what kind of resources would be required while running or maintaining the current operations and systems and practices, what resources would be required to implement the change. Resources in terms of say it could be physical resources, it could be financial resources, it could be monetary resources, it could be people related resources, right. So, there could be lot of resources that would be required. Say for example, if you want to bring about a change in the technology or you want to go for implementing an ERP system, right. So, you also need lot of resources in terms of machines, right, computers, interfaces for that, and also need money to support these activities. So, you have to see that enough resources are being allotted to implement the change, physical and financial both kind of resources are required, so that you are able to successfully implement them. Then the next stage is that reward transition behavior. What I mean to say here is that rewarding transition behavior is that you need to see that during the transition phase, as and when we move ahead to successfully implement change in different phases, and at each phases when you are able to do it successfully, you see that those people who are going to be involved or engaged with that particular stage are being appreciated, okay, being rewarded successfully. So, that the level of motivation moves up and they better engage themselves to work for the next stage. So, it is basically related to the behavior of the people, because in the transition stage if you are not able to motivate people to move forward, then they continue to work with the old systems and practices, right. So, it is very very important that you link reward with transition behaviors, that okay, now we are going to give up the old systems and practices and we are going to adopt the new systems and practices, and you also develop a feedback mechanism. So, you get feedback that how the system is working at different stages, and based on that feedback you take certain corrective actions, because unless you get feedback you cannot take certain corrective actions to improve the system, right. So, you also need to ensure that there is a feedback loop which provides you feedback about how the system is working, what are the lacunas, what are the problems and barriers that people are facing while working with the new system, which could be corrected by the change managers or the transition manager. So, now if you look at this transition plan is very very important, and the managers need to keep these points while attending change to implement successfully. Now, moving further, what we are going to discuss is these points in detail. So, at the first stage, as I told you that you need to appoint a transition manager. Okay. So, the transition manager is going to be someone who is going to be in charge of the change, or he is going to look at the pre-change state, right. And he would also be a person who is going to be in charge of the post-change state, right. So, for example, if you want to bring about a change in your performance management system, now you had a performance system management system which was manual earlier, right. Now, you want to develop a performance management system which is going to be online, and you also try to bring out certain other inputs in your performance management system to make it more effective, acceptable, transparent to the people. Now, if you want to bring about this kind of change, you need to engage one person as the in charge, who is going to look at what are the things that is currently existing at the pre-change state and what kind of things you are looking at the post-change state, right. And then it is his responsibility to ensure that you are moving through this transition phase successfully while implementing a new performance management system in the organization. So, the change managers must be given enough resources as well as power, both so that they are able to focus on what is being done, right. So, they need resources so that they can work on the new performance management system. They should not focus more on what you call the current operation systems, because the current operation systems need to be maintained only for some time. After that, it is going to be discarded, right. So, the manager should be empowered to use resources that is allocated for the purpose of implementing an online performance management system, so that he can develop it, right, by engaging various stakeholders in the process. Similarly, he should also get enough respect of both the existing operators, the leadership, and also those who are going to work or look at the new system. Similarly, also look at the support and commitment that these change managers require, because if the support and commitment is not there, not especially from the top management but from other stakeholders as well, then there could be a lot of resistance and non-compliance issues, right. So, he should be a person who at least have some respect, he should be given enough power, and should be empowered, you can say, and he should be able to win the support and commitment of the people in the process, because that would bring enough say confidence in the person concerned, the person who is going to be appointed as transition manager, to ensure that he is able to move from A to B while going through this transition state, right. So, then he also need to identify the various activities. Now, if you look at this diagram, okay, it looks something like a fishbone diagram, right. So, this is the objective. The objective here is to implement a new performance management system, right. Now, if you look at this, so from here you are going to move to this. So, in order to say implement a new performance management system and while maintaining the old performance management system for some time, what you need to do basically here is that you have to identify the various tasks that need to be looked into, right. Say for example, task A could be something like what are the things that you would like to include in the new performance management system, whether you want to have it online. So, what kind of online system you want to have, right, whether you want to have it developed within the organization or you want to outsource it, right. Then this online performance management system is going to be for all the employees or only you want to have it for executives only, right. So, there could be and then what kind of method you want to adopt for online performance management system, right, whether you want to say replace the existing rating system with a 360-degree feedback, right. So, these could be the different activities that need to be identified one by one, so that you are able to achieve the goals and objectives, right. So, you need to stimulate your thinking about what needs to be done. So, you need to identify various tasks and for these are the task A, task B, task C, task D, task E, and then based on that you need to see that how you are going to complement them, right. Say for example, you have a performance management system where the immediate supervisor is going to rate using a rating scale his subordinate. Now, this is one and this you want to replace with a more robust system, say 360-degree feedback. Now, you want to change the way rating is to be done. It is not one person, but a number of people or stakeholders are going to be involved in the process. So, how you are going to transit from that system to this system. So, for that you need to identify different activities which need to be carried out and how you are going to take it up, right. So, that successfully you are able to successfully achieve your goals and objectives, right. So, you need to identify various tasks. This is the role of the transition manager. Now, if you look at that, when you are going for developing an implementation plan, so you need to look at two things, that is the change participants expectations and also clarify the end state, what exactly you want, right. So, now if you look at this talks about what? The expectations, likelihood that the change is going to happen. Now, if you look at the same example where we talked about moving to a online performance management system, which is going to be a 360-degree feedback system, right. So, the kind of change that you want to bring, that it is manual earlier, now you want to make it online. Second is that you had a rating scale based system where supervisors only used to appraise the performance. Now, you want to have a system where you are going to have a multiple stakeholders who are going to be involved in the appraisal system, right. Now, you have to look at the possibility of occurring this. So, that is going to be high or low. Then the appeal, whether the person, the change manager or the transition manager is able to appeal to this process or not. So, it is based on what? The expectations of the change participants, whether they are going to accept it or not accept it, and then what is the end state, how it is going to benefit them, right. So, you need to identify that okay, we want to move a system which is going to be more transparent and accurate, where a number of persons are going to be involved in the process, right. So, if you look at this, if both is high, then you need to identify the task and time frame, okay, schedule everything properly. But if the possibility is low, then target low hanging fruits. You identify those people who are going to abstract this or those who are going to be easily acceptable, so that you are able to ensure quick wins and build your credibility, right. So, here you need to look at those soft targets which are easy to catch. So, make them accept, so that it gives you an opportunity to show quick case others that okay, see this is possible and this person has accepted it. Here you are increasing appeal by communicating a compelling vision or you go for modifying the change if it is not happening, because the appeal is low, the likelihood is high, then you need to come tell that okay, why we want to go for it. And finally, you have this, if both are low, then you have a problem, then you need to communicate as much as possible, okay, right, or you go for modifying the change. So, this gives you the least likelihood of the change happening, right. So, if you look at this, it makes you clear that it is very, very important to keep the participants' expectations, whether the change is really is going to happen and what exactly we want to achieve through this change, right. Moving further, so as I told you that the next point was achieving the end state, the desired state. So, the end state is something that what you call moving from a known state to an unknown state, right. Suppose the current traditional performance management system that you are using, an online performance management system having a 360-degree evaluation. So, it is something that is unknown, because people have not used it earlier, right. So, moving from this unknown stage to a known state, you have a plan, right. So, you need to identify your specific task and time frame, and then you move ahead one step at a time, right. For example, you say that okay, first of all you want to bring about a change in the existing performance appraisal system by including more people in the system, not going through say online system, right. You implement and review this, if it is successful, now you say that you want to make it online. So, you identify the various steps that you want to go through the change process, right, and then accordingly you implement one system, review it, see the feedback, if it is working then move to the next stage. If it is not working, then you bring the necessary changes at the first stage and then you go about. And gradually what will happen, that you will be able to move to the end stage, and this would also be known to you, it will not be unknown to you, right. So, clarifying the end state is very, very important. Now, Beckhardt and Harris has identified several characteristics, you can say, of an effective transition plan, right. So, when we are going through this transition plan, it is very, very important to look at how do we go about it successfully, because unless you are able to transit from the current state to your end state successfully, the change will not be implemented properly or effectively, or when the implementation will be faulty, right. So, these are the 7 characteristics of effective transition plan, which we are going to discuss now, like purposeful, right, activities linked to the change goal. Make sure that each activity is aligned to the goal or the objectives related to the change, right. It has to be task specific, right. So, each specific task that you are going to carry out directed to bring about a change must be identified, right. Third, integrated. Since tasks are integrated with each other, you need to show that yes, we go to the first step, then we move to the next step, and the next step is dependent on the first step, right. So, these interdependencies are being factored in while you are going to implement change. Then temporal means that you have a time frame for everything, so that you are able to successfully implement it. So, when you go for scheduling, you need to ensure that everything is done properly. Then you should be able to adopt this. So, you also have a contingency plan, provided you are not able to implement successfully. Say for example, if you want to move to a new performance management system, which is going to be online, right, but for several reasons you are not able to build up the software and you are not able to bring it online, then you should be ready with the contingency plan. It does not mean that you are reversing back to the old plan, right, but you also need to ensure that there are certain plans or actions which is going to take care of this. Say for example, if you are not able to implement online platform for performance management, then you say that okay, at this point of time we are going to have it manually, but we are going to ensure that it is going to be a 360-degree technique. Okay. The moment you are able to bring about a change related to the platform, you go about it. So, you must be ready with some contingency plan which is going to work in emergency. Then the next point is agreed, make sure that all participants agree to this plan. Okay. They say that okay, this is good and it is possible only when you communicate with them the benefits of this, how it is going to help them to have a more open, transparent system of performance management, because performance management is related to your reward, promotions and all kind of things. So, if it is open and transparent, then everybody see a point to it, and then they would all agree to it, and then make sure that it is cost effective. Definitely, if you are moving to an online performance management system, it is going to be very cost effective compared to a traditional performance management system, right. And that is why I have given this example to explain that when you move through the transition phase, what are the things that you need to look at. Moving further, you have to see that there are certain points on which you have need to keep more attention. Say for example, must specify the purpose, ensure that task is specified, then time frame must be decided, right. You must have a time frame and then also a contingency plan, right. So, these are some of the things that is more important than other points, right. Moving further, what we are going to discuss is when I was talking about the multiple leverage points, right. See, when you are going to bring about a change in the system in one part of the system, then it also trigger forces that seek to realign all elements by re-establishing the status quo, because your status quo is disturbed if you go for a change. So, again you need to bring about a status quo, that is the new status quo, right. So, this new status quo demands that you also bring about changes in other systems and practices, right. For example, the moment you say that you are moving to an online performance management system, okay, then you also need to engage other departments, say IT departments, line managers, HR managers into the process. So, they also need to get ready with the kind of system that you require to implement an online performance management system, and you also need to schedule each and every activities properly, so that it is successfully implemented and completed on time, and that is why scheduling is very important. One tool that technique that can be used is like critical path method, critical path analysis. So, you identify each critical path. So, this shows the path, right, and that dependencies also it is showing. For example, this is 1, right, then this could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right. So, it goes like that. So, it identifies that which activity you need to take up first and which activity you are going to take later, right. So, you need to identify and each path and what is to be done at what. For example, when you are going to move from 5 to 8 to 10, then it has to go through via this. For example, 1 to 5, it has to go through this, right. It means these are the critical paths that have been identified and the total number of activities that is identified. So, 22 activities in this example, right. So, all these 22 activities are being scheduled also. Scheduling is important. So, scheduling means that you identify the time plan for each activities and which activity will take place after which activity, and how would you go about these activities to successfully implement. So, these are the various leverage points and scheduling through which you can implement the change plan successfully. So, you are using a planning tool that is known as critical path analysis to successfully bring about a change. So, that all paths are clear, all activities are identified, and you know which activities at what time frame is to be done. So, that you are able to complete the entire activities through your scheduling. If you are not able to follow this, then there is a possibility of cost and time overrun, okay. And then it may jeopardize and put the entire change plan in say a system which is not going to be successful, right. And then the next point that we have discussed is provide needed resources. You also need to ensure that whatever resources is required, right, is given to the change managers. It include money, materials, support from the top managers, HR support. So, all kind of resources need to be provided to the change managers or the transition manager, so that he is able to successfully implement it. So, this point is very important, because if you are not able to provide these resources, then it is very difficult to carry out all the activities, because each activity requires some kind of resources to carry it out, right. Then rewarding the transient behavior. So, you can adopt, you can look at it as a carrot and stick approach, right. So, make sure that at the pre stage, when you move to the post change, it means that you are going to provide some incentives to people who are ready to go for a change, right. So, you need to reward those behaviors where people accept and adopt new behaviors, right, and this shows that ready to go for a new kind of change, right. Moving further, you have to have a feedback mechanism, right. So, you need to create a feedback loop, integrating all systems together, so that you get feedback at each and every stage of implementation. It also acts as a control mechanism, because with this feedback loop you would be able to identify what is happening at different stages and what kind of corrective actions are required. This also helps you to monitor the progress periodically and take corrective actions that is required. So, these are the different stages that we have talked about, which needs to be taken care while you are transiting from the current state to the desired state. Now, we will take some examples of some companies that how they have successfully implemented their change management plan, like Nokia. You know that it was one of the world's largest supplier of mobile devices, but what happened? After 2010, the profit declined, okay, and Apple was main competitor, because they came out with iPhones. Then in 2017, the Nokia decided to reinvent itself under the leadership of a new CEO, and then the new management team decided that okay, the phone division has to be shifted to Microsoft, right. So, they changed the focus of its operations, and they are trying to build up networks and mapping technologies. So, what they did basically, they brought about a change in the operational activities, the kind of thing that they have been doing. Now, if you look at this, the new CEO was acting as a transition manager, and this new CEO decided that how do they go about bring about a successful change in the operational activities of the Nokia and bring about it successfully. I have other examples also like Amazon, okay, where you will find that it is consistently changing. Okay. It is going through a lot of changes under the leadership of Jeff Bezos. Okay. You know that Amazon was a company earlier which was limited to books and CDs and DVDs. Then it became the largest offering new products in all areas, okay. And it is not only selling products online, but it is also offering the services through their Prime services. They have instant videos. Okay. Now, you know that the Amazon has diversified to such an extent that it is selling more than 2 million products to customers all over the world. Now, it is not only that, they have also diversified into feature films, right. You know that in 2017, the team that made the films got 3 Oscar awards. So, they have diversified into different fields, right. So, you can see that this company has been changing continuously, constantly. So, how they do it? By putting the customer first. So, they develop a successful change management plan for every change that they want to bring about in their organizations in terms of activities that they want to carry out. Then I have another example of GE, which basically progressed a lot under the leadership of Jack Welch, right. So, when he left, the GE was worth 280 million. So, you can see that how he built up a successful company, and then he went for complete overhaul. One example that I have given here is of implementing Six Sigma, okay, which is related to quality programs in organizations. Now, through the Six Sigma programs, GE ensured that their products are close to perfect as possible, so that they are able to build a product which is good in terms of quality, right. Now, when they went about bringing about a change and they tried to introduce the Six Sigma in their quality to make the product perfect, what actually happened? They developed a change management plan under the CEO of what you call this person Jack Welch, and then he developed an implementation plan. Okay. And he tried to see that how they can come out with a plan in the quality program through which they are going to have a product which is going to be as perfect as possible. Okay. Six Sigma actually talks about the defects in which is going to be very less, maybe 3 to 4 per million products, right. So, they wanted to come out with a product which is going to be perfect, and for that they implemented a plan and they identified the activities, they appointed a manager to look at it. In fact, it was looked after by Jack Welch itself. So, he became the transition manager, and then he identified activities, scheduled it, and tried to see that how he is able to implement it successfully, and based on the feedback he tried to build up the products in G, which were basically Six Sigma compliance, right. So, and by implementing this, actually the company made a lot of profit, which was convincing to the stakeholders that okay, this is a good move and then let us go for it. And he was able to save say almost $10 billion per annum, which is a good amount, right. So, these examples basically show that if you are able to successfully transition the change, then it is going to bring good results for the organization. Thank you very much.